what I love most when I get to bring to you that Enlightenment soul age group perspective from a 5D self-empowered enlightened mystics perspective. I know we use these words. These words all mean something to the people who are in the Enlightenment soul age group and the 5D perspective is why I love bringing them to you, because it's integrating human, spiritual, and spirituality. So a person who has an integrated mind and is a differentiated self and is an agent of themselves and is in a restorative embodied self. It's all a person who's a functional adult. So this means they have discernment. It means, though, they also have experiences like those lovely, lovely channeled guidances. When I do Akashic record readings, when I have tarot consultations, when I have my own dream states, which have nothing to do with the life outside of me, but everything to do with my oversoul. And how moving from my immediate oversoul to the collective, when we discuss these in the Lightworker's Life, the paid subscription-based model content of the episodes, being able to share with 5D individuals these experiences because they do discern. They do know science is walk with spirituality one-on-one. There's not a competition between the two. And for anyone who's 5DC and in that Enlightenment Soul Age group, this is where you will have navigated and or you gravitate this way naturally. You don't discount education, not the rigid people. The rigid educators are actually, for those of us who are a differentiated self, we are confident. We do not have a shame cycle because we do not cower in a way that our ancestors did, because somehow, one way or another, we got enough attunement, enough repair when rupture took place. We had enough of that secure attachment, and then as we moved into life, what we had even more importantly was the ability to use our own left and right mode. So when the implicit memory from our brainstem or charge states, anything coming up from our body, we didn't disconnect our masculine and our feminine, stayed one, and our restorative embodied self stayed online because we again got enough of that attunement and repair and rupture from our caregiver or caregivers, for those who have more than one, and our siblings. So all of our attachments, because your attachment figures are not only one of the parents, some have two, and even when you don't have the presence of the one, that means that you have one attachment figure that can be secure, the other is non-existent. So when you look at attachment categories, they will talk about all attachment figures because you don't have one. There's what's called alloparenting in our actual mammalian heritage. And I don't want to bore you, but that means we have a handful, if not a little bit of a town, which are, it's equal to those sayings as well, that we will look to us, the infant. So in that first year of life, you actually have this attachment system. If I remember correctly, it's in the limbic area. And in the first year of life, also what I learned was that the right brain hemisphere is the first part of the brain to continue developing, something along those lines. I grasped the gist of my lessons. I don't remember them like a computer because I'm not one, and I don't have great memorization skills, and I'm not trying to memorize stuff. So I'm explaining, food for thought. You can go look it up or research it or ask me and I'll send you to my sources, of course. So that right brain hemisphere is the first to develop, but it's also where this attachment system lies. And here's where, when there is unresolved trauma, so this implicit memory, the charge states, the trauma is too much, too fast, too soon, the body didn't have time to process it. And as an infant, there's many things we'll go through. So it's a case-by-case basis, and one of the findings from the lovely polyvagal theory, Dr. Stephen Porges, is that it's not the event that takes place. The studies show it's actually the nervous system, the person, that is going to either have it stored as trauma or not. And that's because the nervous system is what's responding immediately. So emotions is actually something that the evolutionary processes or psychologists or evolutionary group of people, and I learned this one from Russell Coates. In fact, let me see if I can find my notes. He has a really great book also, if anyone wants to, that I'd say I don't know if you'll see it right, but managing your anger using compassion-focused therapy to calm your rage and heal your relationships. It's a really great book. I only started skimming it, but he has one area where he talks about how to monitor. And so there's like a form, and you know, look at the triggers, and then you look at the emotion, the thoughts, the behaviors, what you do, and then what your compassionate self says. So you want to identify compassionate self and what would your compassionate self do and the outcome. The problem here is that most people don't realize that they might not choose compassion and they choose their inner critic, which is really part of the shame cycle, which keeps them in shame. So feeling ashamed and then that they are bad, or justifying it when you're denying it, and then using that anger and blaming others. So shame, blame, fault, revenge, these are loops that keep people in mental prisons and don't resolve trauma. In fact, the reason compassion is discussed, and some people don't know that, again, emotions are not, oh, I'm only feeling love and I'm going to allow that to be. It's you're feeling love if you are, because you're engaging in your ventral vagus nerve, and your mind is participating in a way of, I like to use the word Krishna Lila. So it's in a way of exploring the depths of you with seriousness and playfulness. It's called, wow, I'm a person. I have feelings and I have thoughts. And I'm dealing with something. So usually our day-to-day is what allows us to become more and more resilient if you're choosing love. But to choose love, what I've noticed is the people who have shame cycles choose fear. Because shame hides itself. So there's justifying the implicit memory because there's shame that comes up with it. And people just say, oh, but it's a stupid emotion, so I don't need to pay attention to it. It's just there. And that's where you're not going to mature an integrated mind, because here's where it's coming from that nonverbal, the right brain, the right mode, the right side, the brainstem apparently. So again, anger's coming from that brainstem, the nervous system. There's a bunch of different ways to explain it. And then the person who's allowing themselves not to pay attention to their temperature, but justifying the emotion or saying it's silly, I don't need to pay attention to it. You don't create resiliency within your nervous system because you're allowing it to continue a pattern, a habit. It's straightforward. Now, let me spell this out. There's good somatic sensory motor therapists for those who have modulated or dysregulated embodied selves. I come from an Enlightenment soul age perspective with a body that is in a resolution, whatever the word is. Right now, my mind's going blank on that word, but the embodied self of a person who feels it's okay to be me, it's okay to be imperfect, I am a human, and I'm sharing food for thought. If you don't like it, you can go elsewhere. If you complain about it, you complain about it. Like, no big deal. It's not the end of me. The people who have shame and then they shove it, they don't actually feel this way. And when I say this, I mean in my heart, it's zero land, because you have your opinion. I don't actually have anything against you potentially thinking that it's stupid for someone to speak something. I can think a lot of times when I've thought stupid, and I learned instead of saying it to be polite and also recognize that that's stupid and arrogant and egoic. And really, do I know everything? This word stupid, I learned from one of my teachers in high school. And I was the annoying teenager, goody two-shoes and all that. I still am that. I'm just a grown-up about it now. But, and I know I told you I was going to say this thing from Russell Coates, but I need to find my notes. Here he is. So he actually talks about how CFT, I think it's CFT, family system. So they have, there's different groups of therapists that I learned from. So evolutionary processes, he says, when they look at our emotional lives, they have revealed, or it indicates that we human beings didn't evolve to regulate our emotions. We evolved to co-regulate them through connections with other people. And then he goes on to share other data points. You also learn that in order for you to be a secure attachment person, your parent or parents, again, they don't have to attune to you 100%. So meet your every soothing emotional need. It's the repairing of when you're not soothed that helps your nervous system to become resilient. So to know how to engage in the ventral vagus nerve and therefore be a embodied self that is in the wholeness of you, and not embodied self that stays modulated or becomes modulated or is dysregulated and stays or becomes. And this is where You can look those up. I bought the book, haven't read it yet. It's another one. There's so many great authors, but I'm happy to share the title that way. If anyone has room for book reading right now, you can look it up and get it, and you can start learning about the dysregulated, modulated, and the restorative. There you go. Restorative embodied self. So the author is Alan Fogel, PhD. The book is Restored Embodiment and Resilience, a guide to disrupt habits, create inner peace, deepen relationships, and feel greater presence. So I will let you in on what I find out once I start reading it. You also might want to look into Mindsight, the new science of personal transformation. That's Daniel Siegel. I'm taking his interpersonal neurobiology course. The other one that is really great, if I have any people that have clairs, you might want to look into this one. The Cognitive Neuroscience of Religious Experience. This is Patrick McNamara, and it's very important for those of you who have dreams because of the neuroscience stuff. So back to us and these lovely relationships that people don't nurture. The individuals who don't have a restorative embodied self have a much more challenging time feeling good around people because their body still doesn't feel safe. So there's stuff to unpack. But the ones of us who are 5DC and in the Enlightenment Soul Age group, we have a restorative embodied self. We have this integrated mind. So when emotions come up, we don't justify, we actually know how to handle them because we use love. We don't know this shame because we're not going to do that. I haven't ever done that in my entire life. The only time I felt shame was when I figured out that society had taught me to cast stones. So that, the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, or don't cast a stone because none of us can. Yeah, I discovered I was, because as a teenager I was saying I was a goody two-shoes, and I was a child learning from society to be in duality. And when I discovered that, I felt the feeling, and then I said, but wait a minute, you didn't teach yourself to do this bad and good thing. The adults out there, these teachers, all the people out there, they're the ones who taught me. Let me think about that one. Do I think it's right in my body, and knowing that I am committed to not casting stones, not because someone's going to come punish me, by the way, but because I actually feel in my heart that it's wrong for me to cast a stone. I also feel it's very unnecessary for me to judge a book by its cover. I also think a lot of people use stereotypes and they say these words and then they actually don't do it. Let me think. Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to cast a stone, even though others may not know that I'm not casting stones. In my heart of hearts, I know I'm not, because I know the difference now. It's a feeling. If you have a relationship with your feelings, you know the difference and you grow up. And that's because you're creating a different relationship when you're interacting with people. It's called a differentiated other. So I'm not you and you're not me, and I'm deciding to disengage from thinking and feeling about casting stone in a way that society to this day is still teaching people, and that I hear from those who have their groups. And I can explain also the neuroscience. Although I'm not the mind expert, I can explain what I learned. There's a couple of videos on the Well or Big Think on this whole us versus them and how your brain actually works, and the oxytocin that gets shoot up as you decide to become more and more identified with your group. So it's like when I see people who have been particularly mistreated by another group, which is what I see right now. They're all mistreating each other. All people that are in different divides. And so they all have their groups and they all feel good together because they get the thumbs up. So they have certainty, belonging, and they even have their idea of agency through the group's mission and whatnot. It can also be just one person, by the way. It's not just a group. It can just be one human being who tells you everything and you're going to become what that person wants you to be, and vice versa. It's called merging, which is not a differentiated self. And that's where integration doesn't happen, because essentially your implicit memory stuff, your emotions, get handled by another human being or a group of people, and you all support each other when you get into these emotions as well, which is where you justify, oh, it's okay for me to, me group, insult you, yell at you, be in a rage, and say that I'm fighting for justice. And it's okay for me, other group, to become rigid and harsh and say, no, but your way of life is not good because I have my texts from scriptures, ancient times, that say this is good. And then you have the rigid leaders who are there. This is the issue. We have leaders that are in obtuse, rigid form who have taken it up to become grandiose because, they don't even realize what a person who's enlightened will. Whenever I see any of these people who stand in specific postures, and I'm trying to be polite because I've been working on trying to express when I see this, as a person who I do identify with she, and I do identify with men who say he and all that, I identify and understand our ancestors, and I understand our new generation. And as a person who considers myself very intellectually, I may do the pseudoscience, I do it on purpose in a very specific way, but I am very intellectual. And I'll never forget when I came across this pastor who has written books, who has been actually supporting couples in a way. And all I could say is, I mean, not only I watched video after video after video of this person speaking stereotypes, I was getting so into my Kali mode because, humanly speaking, this is a human being who is dumbing down humanity to the extent of saying, here, let me bring our past back, put it in a shape that looks good, and we'll keep perpetuating this very lifestyle to you. And let me tell you how right this is. And seeing a flock, because he has a flock of men and women in this case, who I'm sure still identify as men and women with stereotypes, smile, and basically with this smile be appreciative of someone who is basically dumbing them down, because see, to an infinite higher human consciousness potential being, you're dumbing humanity down by literally equating male and female, in this case relationship, as something that is of a textbook, and that men, so see, I will say again, I'm a woman, and I had this very similar discussion with one of my friends, and I disengaged from it because I can tell when shame's beginning to come up. Because here's where a mystic is a person who's in tune with their own body and that of another. But because when you're in the Enlightenment soul age group, you're not going to be someone who's going to let me point out to you because I think I can know. No, I'm going to drop it like a hat and leave it alone, because we care about creating harmony and expansion and not shaming, because shaming doesn't do that. It actually allows a person to become defensive, feel attacked, and that's essentially what is happening if you're going to point out something to someone that they can't even be aware of because they don't have a relationship with their right modality, because they didn't develop that, because they ignored that very feeling. And so, long story short, when I see men, and this has been my entire life, and I am sad to say how many of them perpetuate stereotypes, I sit there silently and leave it alone, because that's their identity. And if they can feel good about themselves with that, I'm going to try and support the people who are not rigid leaders, and in this case men, who will speak sensibly and relate to men in a more moderate tone and not perpetuate stereotypes that dumb them down. Because see, here's where I said to myself, once I was done with these videos, in the fury of Kali, I'm like, wow, now if I were a male, I'd be all over this, and not in a calm way. I'd be all over this dude, I'd be all over these people, I'd be all over it in so many different ways, because intellectually speaking, you just basically limited the very aspect of what I can do with my physical human brain based on my gender. And these men that say, oh no, but we are this, I choose silence on purpose, because I do not want to make statements that are unkind, because it's unnecessary, because apparently there's already a hiding that is, in fact, thank you so much, Terry Real, for existing. Terry Real, you should look him up, anyone. I don't know all of his work yet. I don't think I have any of his books, but I get to learn from him on NICABM courses that I take. And here's where one of his data points comes to my brain when he talks about young boys and 3-year-old boys, essentially, and this unfortunate patriarchal situation that has young boys of that age immediately aware that their expression of emotion is not going to get anything. So there's a suppression of it, and I've seen men with this. This is again, as a woman, I've seen not only men, just women that identify with women. It comes in a specific way, and then if I look at a body, non-gender, it's this is where I can perceive, and anyone who is an intuitive will perceive the person's energy. It comes through every pore of you. If you're not judging or casting stones. So silent mind that is in the presence of a body, because we're all nervous systems. FYI, thank you, Stephen Porges, for explaining how we communicate through our nervous systems. And then these charge states that are frozen in time, we're all energy. A person who's a mystic in the Enlightenment Soul Age group will be picking up on those. People vary in their vibration because they can't maintain the enlightenment one, because they're not learning how to manage their own emotional state, because they're not even metabolizing any emotion that's coming up from their body. And some of them, they just hide it away with their habits. And there's not a very nice way to put that one either, but they will all support the stereotypes. So I actually have a friend who knows me very well, and I'll close with this one. She was presenting some situation, this was recent, I think last year, about gender stereotypes. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And she knows me so well. She's, what? You're telling me I'm right about a stereotype? It's like, I really don't like stereotypes, but apparently people love them. They love sitting in them. They love perpetuating them. I see between men and women who seem intellectually savvy, they keep on saying, no, these are the roles. These are the roles. So I can't say no. But I said, I will add, it's not just the genders, it's actually humanity. So and she's like, there's my friend. I was like, yeah, what'd you think? I actually, humanly speaking, as a teenager, moved into quote unquote feminism. And I realized like, this isn't going to actually bring people to their full potential. And it's kind of bullshit. It's kind of one-sided, but I won't support other types of jokes either that are important, because there are areas where we're all still wanting to voice seriously, like the part about approval and what yes and no means. This is, for example, very, very beautiful for me to see as a grown person, that the teenagers and the adults now can learn about actual yes and no, and talk of it seriously. Even though I know some think it's a big deal, they don't know what it's like probably to be on another end of a spectrum, and they're taking it into, again, any person who's an adult can understand when changes are about the humor behind it. This is why, if you can be in neutrality, you present in neutrality something important. You don't have to yell about it. The people who yell at each other, they don't create safe spaces. And there's no need to yell when something's important. It's important for real, for reasons. And so again, you can see that we're moving into more of our humanity thanks to the good psychoeducators. Thanks to them explaining implicit memory is that emotion, and it comes in a way from a safety behavior, etc., etc. The ones who are using stories, they will have their flock, and they will stay that way, as I told my friend. That doesn't dumb down humanity as a whole, because luckily for us, we have the educators who care. They're flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, stable. They have technology. They keep building their science with the empirical data. And so sooner or later, it's really just going to be a matter of opinions for some things. And the system is moving into taking into consideration things. Although I know a lot of individuals, they always feel it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough, but they don't look at how we've progressed. And not enough is where you're sitting in the now, in the midst of change. If you don't know that change takes time, you don't know that change takes time. I'm a political science major. One of the reasons that I did not move into doing anything with the system is because of recognizing how slow things are. But what I recognize most of all, it's people that slow it down, and it's the divide, like gender stereotypes and just anything that's a stereotype. And when people want to debate the whole yes-no thing, it's like, dude, why are we debating? Why are we yelling? There's no reason to yell or debate. There's always going to be gray, but leading individuals to know how to be clear, this is where, humanly speaking, we're now here. We're here where it's, hey, man, woman, non-gender. We're people. We're here today because our species is here today. It wasn't here when, Frank Sinatra was around. I love listening to Frank Sinatra. Some people don't listen to him because of knowing of his history, for example. I can respect that. Same way I want to be respected if I'm going to listen to him. So there is always ways for adults to talk. Let's create conversations and let's share compassion. It's very important, understanding, love, and the more we can educate, the more we can evolve as a species. I look forward to bringing you more. Have a great day.